Krystena, thank you so much for being a guest on our podcast today. We're excited to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Let's just dive right into it. Let's start off. What first inspired you to move into leadership strategy and organizational psychology?
Yeah, great question. I've always been curious about people and behavior. And at the same time, I've kind of had a natural drive towards leadership. My first job as a manager was when I was 18 years old, which was kind of crazy as an 18-year-old. And
Yeah.
then as I advanced my career and became an executive, I realized it became less about the title and running a business and more about the impact of how a leader can really transform organizations and the individuals that they lead. So it really became about the impact, both positive and negative. So when I think about the inspiration, it wasn't really a moment or significant time. It was really about a series of moments and watching how amazing leaders um, formed and shaped organizations and how not so amazing leaders also shaped and formed organizations.
Yeah.
So, and I also watched how it shaped people in the organizations, even their personal lives. So that's kind of when it became my calling
Yeah.
and said, I have to impact people in the workplace because it has the ripple effect across everything they do in life.
Yeah. I'm sure it's so rewarding to see. And I mean to see the results of what you do. So let's keep on that topic. I have a lot of my questions written down, so bear with me as I look up
Yep.
at my monitor
Yep.
too, because with your background, I don't want to mess up words here with the psychology and everything there. So after years in the space, what continues to inspire you about leadership development and coaching? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah. So what inspires me about it is I think the same reason I moved into it is the curiosity about the human spirit and then to witness the change that people do when they're open to it. Um, what I found in the work that I do is most of us um, really go about our day with thinking we're doing the very best and we want to do the very best. But what we don't realize is that we're getting in our own way all the time. And
Mm,
it could be for various reasons. It could be unconscious bias. It could be our values. It could be the environment. And then when I introduce people to coaching and development in a different way, and I give them that safe space where their
yeah.
ego doesn't have to play and they can just be honest with themselves, it is so amazing to see their growth and to see them open to being curious. And it just transforms them. It transforms their connections with their team and their entire organization. So that's what inspires me because when I see that, it is, it just lights me up because they become a different person and they're living that joy. And then it just transforms the entire organization and everybody around them.
Yeah. That's okay. It makes me so excited because I've also been listening to a podcast with some coaching. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so bear with me, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this because I think this is connected. I was driving last night to pick up my in-laws. They flew in town. We're in Utah. They're from Oklahoma. And I was listening to this podcast, and this coach, he doesn't call himself a coach, he calls himself a mental programmer. I don't know if you've heard people call him that, doing that and talking about that. But he was talking about, he's like, most people's minds are like a Ferrari and they
Mm-hmm.
choose to walk. And that's how much capacity they're using and the capabilities that they're using. So I'm wondering if you kind of see that, and when you start tapping into that and they have a safe place to really understand and grow, do you kind of feel that? Do you kind of feel like it's teaching them like, hey, you've been walking and look what you can do. Like look at the impact
Oh,
you can have.
yes.
You could be driving a
Mhm.
Ferrari,
I,
so to speak.
I completely resonate with that because
Yeah.
what we don't realize is our brain is wired to keep us safe. And
Yeah.
so it's going to always look at the negative. It's going to always try to, in its own way that we don't realize. It's always going to say, oh, there's a tiger, there's a tiger, there's a tiger. And those natural unconscious biases that have been kind of created through our entire life are
Hmm.
there without us even thinking about it. And your brain is making decisions for you without you even knowing it's making those decisions every
Hmm.
day, all the time. So you have no idea those unconscious biases, those values, those all those things that are happening, because they're just happening. It's like that iceberg. You only
Yeah.
see everything is happening below the water line, and the top is what you think. You think, oh yeah, I'm doing the right thing, I'm making the right decisions, and everything is great. But the bottom part is what's really the unconscious of what's going on. So when you
Yeah.
can tap into that and you have a safe space to go, am I really thinking that correctly? Is that really what's going on? It untaps this wealth of information that allows people to look at things differently. And
Yeah.
that's the beauty of coaching. So it is kind of, it's allowing you to think about yourself and how you want to show up differently to
Hmm.
be able to create amazing places. So it is kind of like that, which is amazing to see. But at
Yeah.
the same time, the individual has to be open to that because it can kind of throw you off balance a little bit.
Yeah, well, I bet. I bet. And I've heard that happening before with people where they're not open. I mean, obviously, if you ever try to give somebody advice and they don't want it,
Right.
if you ever do that to a family member, you know that there's, Thanksgiving dinner is awkward, or
Yeah,
something like
right.
that.
Yeah.
So I totally agree. I'm loving this conversation already. I really like this topic. It's been what my wife and I talk about all the time. We've been listening to different podcasts, coaching, but I mean, really not just to, toot your own horn and boost your ego, I guess, which I'm not really worried about that. You seem so awesome. But really, I mean, that's where the coach comes in, right? Where you can have an unbiased third party. It's not my wife telling me because she knows
Mhm.
she can hurt my feelings. She doesn't want to step on my toes, or she knows how I am. Somebody to say, hey, look, this is what we can do, and then really help you step into a new version of yourself or something like that, right? And so, and to create a lot of impact overall. That's the point, right?
It is. And then I think the beauty of coaching, which people don't realize, is we don't give advice. Um, we don't really tell you anything. The beauty of what we do is we listen very deeply. And a lot of times we'll hear things that really aren't said, but they're implied, or we'll listen to the way you say it, and then we'll ask you a question about that. So we help you understand what you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
and we're really good at asking questions based on that.
Right.
Um, and I think the best part about great coaches is we're super curious,
Mm-hmm.
and we really want you to come up with your own ideas and generate your own best self.
Mm-hmm.
So um, I'm a little different because I'm also an industrial organizational psychologist. So I have a ton
Yeah.
of, psychology background. So I can give you information, but I'm not going to give you advice because that's coming from me and I'm very different than you.
Yeah.
So it's not going to work. So I think that what I love about the beauty of coaching is it's truly all about them. It's all about the individual. I've got nothing to do with it other than I'm kind of just your guide, helping you guide through the journey.
Yeah.
And then to watch them just grow is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. Which has got to be so cool for, I know a lot of people listening do the same thing all day, every day, right? I
Hmm.
mean, in sales, right? I do a lot of sales for our company.
Hmm.
And I mean, I like it because it doesn't have to be the same. You can talk, but this is a
Yeah.
whole different level, right? Because you don't know exactly where it's going to go. If you're asking questions, listening, could go a totally different path. I think that's awesome. I'm a little envious, to be honest, right? Because then you can really dive in and learn and new things open up. Anyways, I think it's awesome. I think it's really cool. Such a fun thing. And so I am getting a little sidetracked just because I'm so interested in the topics that we're talking about. So bear with me, and listeners, I'm so sorry for future listeners here. But um, I'm curious. I'm going to read this. just because
Okay.
I've had this planned out. So your mission is to create cultures where people choose to be and contribute their best, right? We're kind of talking about that right now.
Yeah.
But what does that look like in practice for organizations that you partner with?
That's a great question. So before I go to the partnership and how to do it, in the process, let me explain what creating a great culture looks like.
Hmm.
So when you look at research, it says that the top reason people leave organizations, a lot of people will say it's money, but it's not. It's leaders. It's always leaders. And it's always leaders or micromanaging, but it's always the leader. So anytime somebody comes to me and they say, hey, I want to talk about culture, innovations, change, you'll go through all the symptoms, but ultimately it's always leadership. It's always the leader. So, and it's always relational. So it always has to do with how I am making people feel, how I am relating to them. So the thing, and that's the thing I love about people is, we're sticky, we're complicated, and we get in our own way all the
Hmm.
time. But
Yeah.
but what I do is help them think about it a little differently and help them bring the people side back into the organization.
Yeah.
And it's never easy, right? Because we all have, it's a business at the end of the day. We have business outcomes. We have to meet the business outcomes. I've been an executive. I've had to meet those business outcomes, but I help them look about how do we do it, making sure we take care of the relationship and the people
Hmm.
because they can't suffer. If they do, then you have turnover, you have all those things that you don't want,
Hmm.
and then the business suffers. So,
Yeah.
how do we make sure that we create the cultures where people are like banging down the doors to come work for you? They don't
Hmm.
leave and they really produce very high results. And
Yeah.
I've been fortunate to work at companies that, people retire, they stay for 50 years and they retire
Hmm.
out of the same company they started with. So
Yeah.
I know how to do that. And
Yeah.
I've been in companies that do that. And it really is about creating a great culture,
Hmm.
um, and great leadership that makes that happen.
Yeah. I tell you, we can, this doesn't have to go very far. With my thought on this. It's not what I was planning on talking about, but I'm curious if you see it be a hard transition for those leaders to look at it that way because it is common, right? When you have money involved, it's very hard for people to differentiate that and be able to treat people well, right? I mean, I'm not an
Mhm.
expert in it, but I know when money's involved, things get difficult, right? It's why people say don't lend money to your family unless you don't expect it to come back, right? Or whatever the advice is, right? And so my question is, or not really a question, but I'm wondering if you have more thoughts on this, is I've been thinking a lot, my wife and I have been talking a lot about the abundance mindset, right? Where it's
Mhm.
positivity, I have more. And it seems to me like successful organizations, successful leaders are the ones that don't think, how can I cut costs in every single area here? But it's more, if I treat the people right, the money will naturally flow in, right? Instead of vice versa. Of how do I treat the money? And then, because I agree, I've had jobs where I've been paid very well, in my opinion,
Mhm.
but the leadership didn't line up, the micromanaging didn't line up, and it was no matter how much money you have, if you're not happy, you're not happy, right? It's not gonna change that. So I'm curious, before I just go on a complete tangent,
Yep.
does
Yep.
that bring up any thoughts to you?
It does. And I will tell you and I've researched it, and pretty much every time it follows suit. It's how you value your capital and your assets. So if you look at your employees and your people as a very valuable asset,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to put that as a top value versus the metrics and the dollars and the cents and all the numbers, then the money will flow. It's
Mm-hmm.
always going to flow. So you have to figure out what it is that's driving it. So I'll give you examples of the Walt Disney Company. When I worked at the Walt Disney Company, it was always cast, guest, business, three-legged stool, with the concept of we treat our employees and our cast well, they're going to treat the guest well, and then the money's going to come. Um,
Yeah.
and you can't take one away from the other because then the stool falls down. Although you know that if you don't treat the cast well, they're not going to take care of the guest well, and then you're not going to be able to run the business. So
Yeah.
although the three all cycle together, um, they fundamentally believe that the employees come first. It's a
Mhm.
fundamental factor for them. So that I think helps drive their business forward, which is why they have such loyalty in their company.
Mhm.
And you see companies that do that. I think Starbucks is a great example.
Mhm.
Um, Southwest is another example. When you
Yeah.
have companies that drive that forward in that concept, you have the loyalty of those employees, and then they then pay it forward because then they become loyal and they perform higher for that.
Yeah.
So I think what you're saying falls true and the research backs it up.
Yeah.
But
It's
it's a
so
hard balance.
it is. It's hard to do when money isn't flowing, right? I think that's
Mhm.
what differentiates, in my opinion, without any experience, what differentiates a great leader or a great spouse or a great parent, is somebody that they can be that person and they can, take care of people and focus on the people even when financially or, whatever it is, it doesn't look good. But then they know it'll come back, and it all
Yeah.
works out.
And it's easy in business, I will tell you, it's very easy to just say, well, let's just cut like employee engagement things. Let's just cut this, let's just cut that because it's not revenue generating.
Hmm.
And that's what a lot of companies do because it's easy. The ones that I've seen, the great leaders I've seen will say, no, we're not going to cut that. We're going to cut other things. And they get very surgical in where they cut to
Hmm.
compensate because they know it might be a really easy one, but it's going to hurt them in the end. And
Yeah.
those are the leaders that I've seen rise to the top, and I've seen those companies continue to flourish.
Mm. Amazing. Amazing.
Hmm.
Well, okay. I appreciate all the bearing with me with these tangents and
Sure.
just not really, they're all related in my opinion, but not the exact direction I was planning on going. And so I'm going to go back to some of the questions I have and we can just keep
Hmm.
going this route. But I'm curious because a lot of our listeners are executives, as you and I have discussed.
Hmm.
For executives that are stepping into new leadership roles, what's the first thing they should focus on to set themselves up for that success we were just really talking about?
Yes. I will say for executives, and I will say for anybody stepping into any new leadership role, the first thing that I think is critical is to really get to know everyone on the team and your strategic partnerships.
Hmm.
The, we say it, or sometimes people don't say it, but relationships drive businesses. And
Yeah.
getting to understand all the key players, and then making sure they understand what those people think
Hmm.
and what they liked, what they didn't like. The hard part when you're jumping in as an executive, as a VP in those levels is you're also expected to execute pretty fast.
Yeah.
So in order to understand what's working and not working, you want to make sure you're getting that and then executing that because you're at that level, your role is all about leading. There's very little managing and tactical work you're
Mhm.
doing. So you really want to make sure that everyone you're leading um, is ready to follow and they're ready to buy into what you're saying instead of just going, oh, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, I'm going to be a good soldier.
Mhm.
Or they're going to just tell you things that you think you want to hear. You really want to make sure that they're going to give you the right information. So that's why I think it's critical to really spend the time getting to know your team and really understanding what's going on versus what you think might be going on. So
Yeah.
that'll set you up for success, being able to really drive forward and understanding the business.
Yeah. That's perfect. It's when you really break it down, it sounds simple, right? But when you're in it, it's like when you're watching somebody else, when you watch pros play in the NFL or the NBA, and you're like, you should have passed it there. It's obvious. But then when you're the person in there, you're tunnel vision. There's so many things to think about, and it's just chaos, you know? And so doing that, taking a step back, getting to know your team and those people, I mean, you'd be able to catalyze on, or I mean, grow a lot faster. I'm assuming that's what you're meaning.
Exactly. And I think making sure you're asking the right questions.
Mm,
So, asking questions, I think, is the most underrated skill that any leader has. And I talk about this a lot, that we're always taught to have the right answers, especially as leaders. We're taught from, grade school on, who has the right answer? You raise your hand. Everybody has the right answer.
yeah.
We really have to get better at asking really strong, strategic, open-ended questions. That's where you really get great information. Um, because otherwise they're not going to tell you. They're just going to say, yes, that's great, or my day's great. You really want to get really good questions when you do that, because then you're going to find out the information you really want to know.
Yeah.
Because some companies, they're great and people are very transparent, and others, they'll only tell you what you ask. And it's
Hmm.
not intentional by any means. It's just that that's just the culture and how they do things because they're moving so fast.
Yeah.
So, the skill of asking great questions is a really important thing for all executive leaders
Yeah,
to get.
I agree. And everyone, right? Like what you said, no
Everyone.
matter what position you're going to, or even if you're a stay-at-home mom, right?
Yep.
Or stay-at-home dad or whatever it is. It's just so interesting. Um, I'll keep this brief, but I lived for a couple years in Moscow, in Russia. And people always told me that it's just different culture, but I had never lived. I moved there when I was 18 and lived there 18 to 20 for our church. And when I got there, I realized if you ask somebody how their day's going, they actually tell you. You say, "How are you doing?" And they say, if it's bad, you're going to get a 30-minute spiel on why their day's bad, right? Which is not how it was for me growing up in Utah and
Uh,
Wyoming. I mean,
uh-uh.
it was nothing like that. You say, "How you doing?" Good, good, good. Okay,
Right.
let's continue, right? But it's so interesting because you're right. You actually have to, especially with our culture and being in the
Hmm.
US, you have to ask those questions and be strategic with how you're asking them with open-ended answers. I'm the type of person that will ask a question and then I give them an out. I'll give them another question that's a yes or no, just because I'm worried that they don't want to open up, right?
Hmm.
But I think when leaders do that, it just is amazing. We've got a colleague that he asks me questions like that all the time, and it makes you think. It makes you actually step back and really reevaluate. So it's so interesting to me. This whole
It,
topic is. So does that bring anything to your mind before I switch gears a little?
no, I just think the things that I think everybody needs to get better at is asking better questions, giving feedback all the time,
Hmm.
and just getting curious.
Hmm.
Because if if executives can be that open, oh my goodness, the information that would flow to them and the way that they could actually make decisions
Hmm.
would be so great, because a lot of times people don't give them the information, and it's not because they don't want to, and it's not because they intentionally leave it out. It's just because they don't get the information because they're not asking the right questions.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question I did not have planned at all, just
Sure.
based off of that? Do you find it with executive leaders or just leaders in general that it's hard for them to find the balance between professional and personal when they are working with coworkers and colleagues? Because once you get to that point, I'm assuming you're really breaking through a lot of barriers. They're a lot more comfortable. They'll tell you a lot of things, so you get that information. But is it hard to keep the professional version as well, or the work aspect? Do you see that at all? And maybe it not. It's just a random thought for me.
I think that's a great question. I think it depends on the person
Hmm.
and the organization. What I have found is the most um, leaders I'm thinking of like right now are executive vice presidents, CFOs, COOs.
Hmm.
No, because they're really comfortable in their own skin. They're very transparent.
Yeah.
Um, they don't really have. Somebody asked me this question once, and they said, "Are you the same person at home as you are at work?" And I was like, that's weird. Yeah, yes, I am."
Yeah.
And they were like, "Oh." And I was like, well, what does that mean?" And I think some people feel they have to be different.
Mm.
And the people I'm thinking of that I've worked with, they're not different. They're the same. They just they just don't overindulge in certain conversations at work, but they're the same. They show up the same way, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. So they don't
That's-
have a problem um in that because they're the same person both ways.
hmm.
Is that
Interesting.
helpful?
Yeah, it
Okay.
is. Being genuine sounds like to me, being
Yes.
comfortable in your skin, be genuine. It also probably with the questions, right, will create a good culture for your company and they understand who you are, but you're also professional and you get things done and you do have agendas and goals and things that you have to hit as well.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
that makes
exactly.
sense. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. Well, this is totally shifting gears, but it's talking about succession planning. It's a
Okay.
major part, right, of your expertise. So,
Hmm.
what advice would you give an executive who's wanting to position themselves, or just, anyone in general, wants to position themselves in the next in line with their organization?
Sure. Great question. When you look at it, there's always, when you think about, okay, I want to aspire to this role, or I think I'm ready. Um, the most important thing is always look at what competencies and experience that company or your company is looking for in those roles. There,
Hmm.
there always are specifics, right? And then what
Yeah.
you want to do is be able to articulate how your experiences and competencies align to that. So an example I can give is if you have experience in, if you're aspiring to a role and they say, well, I really need somebody that has executed large change initiatives because we live in the world of transformational change and everything is different than it used to be. And
Mhm.
they say that's what I need, an executive that can lead large organizational change
Yeah.
and has done it, and you don't have that experience, then go find it. Go get that experience now. So you can say, yes, I've led a large organizational change transformation, and this is what it looked like.
Mhm.
If you do have that, then make sure that you explain the experience and how that ties to certain competencies that they're looking for.
Mhm.
Because everyone will always look at the behavioral interviewing, the what you've done before, and how is it going to show that you can do it now.
Mhm.
And that's where you want to make sure that you can reasonably say it, because then you're going to be less of a risk than you would if not.
Yeah. I think it's interesting to again, some of the things that we talk about just on this podcast in general, when you really break it down, if you just said it like in, if I said some of the stuff that I'm even asking in 5 words or something like that, it sounds so simple, but then it's actually so complicated.
So
And I think
complicated.
the thing that's simple is, yeah, you need to make sure, it sounds simple, you need to make sure that you align what you've done with the exact needs of the organization. And I
Mhm.
mean, it sounds really common as well, not with succession planning, but also with just landing a new position. Right. But I think the hard thing is a lot of people, I think naturally a lot of us are lazy. I'm naturally more lazy, and you hope somebody else is willing to make that connection for you so that you don't have to be the one, you say, I can definitely do it, but you don't know how, and you don't know all the experiences off the top of your head of how you're going to do it. Right. And if you can't articulate it, you're kind of just playing Russian roulette or not Russian roulette, but just roulette at the casino,
Yep.
hoping that they're going to understand right off the bat.
And
Um,
they won't. They won't. They
yeah.
won't put it together because remember, they're not gonna, they're just as lazy as we are. So
Yeah.
they're not going to put it together. They want you to put it together for them, and you want to paint that picture
Hmm.
perfectly, because that's your, you can do it. You need to show them you can do it. You need to articulate that really well.
Yeah.
That's what's critical, especially if you're seeking that job. The other thing with it is, now it's so much more complicated because you have AI, you have ATS, you have everything else
Mhm.
that looks at all the resumes and everything else.
Yeah.
You have to, everything is back to the relationships. You have to really create that personal connection, because even though your resume and everything else can say you've done something, you need to make sure that they know you and they have that relationship with you, and they know that you can do the job. So find ways in to meet people personally. Do virtual networking, do all of that kind of thing, because it's still all about people.
Hmm.
And your skills can only translate so much on paper and on LinkedIn. And it still is about how do we connect with each other on a human basis.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, we do executive branding, and one of the biggest things I say once it's done is don't just rely on this, right? This will
Hmm.
only get you a percentage of the way there, whether it's 10% or
Yep.
20%, but you've got to network. You've got to know people. I love that advice. I love that. I'm not even gonna add more to that because I think that's great advice. I'm curious if there's a blind spot you consistently see among senior leaders and how they could address it, when it comes to career obstacles for them.
Yep. The blind spot I always get is that perception of the not being curious, not being open-minded. And I've kind of coined it the emperor without any clothes.
Hmm, okay.
And it's really because um, not intentional. And, honestly, I really don't think anything's intentional with people. But they will, because everyone around them, going back to what I said before, everyone around them in the organization will filter information. And because decisions have to be made and with only the data that they have at the moment or the filtered information. And again, the filtering is not intentional. It's just because they think this is all they need to see or what they need to hear. If you
Mhm.
don't take time to make sure you're doing skip level conversations, you're trying to get information flowing directly all the way up and all the way down, you're going to get a faulty perception. So
Mm,
what happens is I will get people that come to me with coaching, and then we do 360 feedback, and they're like, "What? That's not true." Or I
mhm,
have executives that will argue the data in some of their
mhm.
finance or their customer feedback. And I'm like, the data's the data, the feedback's the
Yeah.
feedback.
Mhm,
So as much as we don't like the perception, that is the reality. And it's not your intention to do that. It's just if you're not open and you don't consistently try to do feedback loops,
mhm,
that's what you're going to get. So it's making sure that your intentions align to the perception and you're constantly doing feedback loops in all those channels that are important to you to make
mhm.
sure that it's aligning.
Yeah.
So that's the one blind spot that get people into coaching.
Mhm,
Um, and that will stop them from being coachable or stop their career from moving forward.
mm. Interesting. Interesting. There's so many layers to that. And so I'm
Oh,
trying,
there's so many.
I know there's a lot there, and I know it's probably a fine line that you have to walk with the feedback and things like that. Because I know you mentioned normally it's majority is questions. Then when you
Mhm.
do have to give the feedback and then kind of help it sink in and coach them. But I know a lot of people come to you because they do need the coaching, right? And they know
Mhm.
that. So it's a really interesting area and it's so cool to me. And so I've got two questions left for you. The
Okay.
first one is based off all this information, I'm confident somebody's listening, potential, candidates or clients for you, or somebody that just wants to learn more. What's the best way that they can learn more from you, hear from you, or your organization? What's the best way they can find more?
They can find me on LinkedIn,
Hmm.
Krystena Sterling at LinkedIn.
Hmm.
Spelling is a little weird, so you can
I'll
find me
include it in the
there. You
podcast.
include in
Yeah.
the podcast, great.
Yeah.
Or Sterling Coaching,
Hmm.
and it's sterlingccg.com, so you can find me there.
Perfect.
So either one, reach out and happy to answer any questions, help you in any way.
Perfect. Okay. Okay. Now tangent time. It's been tangents through the whole thing, but
Okay.
this one's actually totally different. I want to talk about your equine therapy. Uh,
Yes.
I'd love for you to give our listeners an idea of what you're doing there. And I think it's really cool with what you were talking about earlier in our earlier conversation, who it's going to help. And so take as much time as you want, but if you could give
Okay.
us a little idea there, I'd love for us to all hear it.
Sure. So I do equine coaching with my company with Sterling Coaching and Consulting. So I do equine coaching with that as well
Hmm.
for teams if you want to bring a team and you can do it with that or individually. But what I opened was a nonprofit called Stable Ground Institute. And it stemmed really from I've owned a horse for 16 years, and she's taught me how to be just an amazing human. All of these things we've talked about, a lot of it I learned from my horse, sometimes in not the most positive ways, like getting thrown off because I wasn't paying attention or I wasn't listening with communication. So I have somehow, through weird ways, acquired a lot of horses. And what I've learned is horses are really expensive. And most people will never have the opportunity to learn what I've learned through them. They also are master teachers of all of these life skills that we can learn because they're prey animals. So all of this will be on the website so you can see it. However, the three areas that I feel most passionate about, and the one is where we launched the nonprofit, is with foster care kids, especially kids aging from ranges like 9 to 18. Chances are at that age, if you were in foster care, you're probably going to stay in foster care. I used to be a guardian ad litem, which is an advocate for children that are put into foster care as
Hmm.
they are in the system. And foster kids deal with a lot of trauma, a lot of um, life issues as they go through the system. So my horses are going to teach them how to connect more to the world and to be able to gain all those great life skills. So as they go out into the world as an adult, they'll be able to get past all that trauma and really be able to live a wonderful life. So my goal is that the nonprofit, they won't pay for anything. The horses will just be able to help them, and I'll be able to reach everyone in my general area or even beyond with
Hmm.
them. So that's my give back. And
Yeah.
my company, a portion of what I make in my company goes towards the nonprofit. So that's kind of the gist. So I'm going to keep growing the nonprofit and keep serving as many people as I can. And that's hopefully where I'll be spending a lot of my time as I go into retirement someday. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I hope
yeah,
whoever takes a chance to listen to that and look it up. And I just think that's awesome. I think it's such a cool thing and not easy. I know having a lot of horses is a lot of work. Having one horse is a lot of work. I've never owned one, but I know we've got friends that have them, and it's a lot. And so I know it's a lot of work, but I'm sure it's very rewarding. So thank you so much. Thank you for being such an amazing guest. I hope we can have you on again. But thank you for your time, Christina.
thank you. This has been so much fun, and I hope I was helpful. And thanks for inviting me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.